gets caught on YouTube.
I think there's something wrong with my thing. I can't see everybody, I guess, today. Yeah. Oh, my screen then maybe isn't big enough. I can. Great. Thank you, Brendan. Welcome to the October 6th, 2022 meeting of the Community Board 6 Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee. My name is Reshma Patel, and I'm the chair of this committee. Tonight, we're joined by District Manager Jesus Perez and Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. Just give me a second here. Members of the public, the meeting is called to order at 6:32 p.m. And as a reminder, New York State law now requires all community board members to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name is not properly displayed, you cannot count towards quorum. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there is a time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. Brian Van Nieuwenhoven will take minutes tonight. Thank you, Brian, for volunteering to take minutes. Before we start our meeting for tonight, I also wanted to acknowledge, as we celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday, that Community Board 6 is based on what was originally called Lenape-Hoking, the unceded homeland of the Lenape people, the original inhabitants and caretakers of this land, who gave Manhattan Island its name, Mannahatta, meaning hilly island or place where we go to gather wood for bows. Right now, New York City has the largest urban population of Indigenous people in the US, and the Lenape people are currently part of the Muncie, Delaware Nation. And we honor with gratitude this land itself and the people who have stewarded it for generations. Committee members, you should have all received an email from the board office with a link to a doodle sign-up sheet for minute takers for the rest of 2022. For your convenience, that link is being shared again in the chat. If you can sign up to take minutes, it would be greatly appreciated. We will now take attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Jim Collins.
Here.
B. Disman.
Present.
Nadeem Kalani.
Present.
Ava Marie Lassiter. Steve O. Steve O. Okay, I do see Steve here, so for the record, he is counted as present. Reshma Patel.
Here.
Hannah Singleman.
Present.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
Present.
Perfect attendance. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Brendan. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes for the September 12th, 2022 meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the September 12th meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CV6 website. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. Committee members are required by state open meetings law to have their Zoom cameras on and your first and last name displayed during tonight's entire meeting. From call to order to adjournment, if you must step away from the computer briefly, you are required to leave your camera on. So tonight's agenda will be finalizing Manhattan Community Board 6's fiscal year 2024 budget priorities, a discussion on the economic impacts of the Central Business District tolling program, or congestion pricing, as it's better known, and then the chair's report, and then the old or new business that we might have. After the committee discussion of each agenda item, but before the Q&A period with the public begins, I will repeat our ground rules as well. So Brendan, if you can share the Airtable.
Sure. Also going to zoom in a little bit. Let me know if I need to zoom in even more.
Okay, I can see it. Other committee members, are you able to see the Airtable?
I'm just going to ask if we could zoom in a tiny bit more. Thank you. This is B.
Better?
Much better. Thank you.
Great.
So as you all know, we've reviewed each of these items at the last meeting in September. Since then, I've reached out again to each of the committee chairs, and we've got updates from some, not all. And I think the kind of the goal for this evening is going to be that we will go through and prioritize what we think should be the priorities here. And in particular, the 4 new items that have been added from the Parks Committee, where we want to put those on our priorities list, should be the focus for tonight. And if anybody wants to review the descriptions again or wants more details, we can have Brendan focus on any of those items. And we got some substantial changes to some of the items from the Housing Committee. And so the affordable housing description, which we had some discussion about last time, has been changed, as well as the write-up on the supportive housing item and the item on more housing for seniors.
I think Jim has his hand raised.
Oh, sure, it's Jim.
I'm just wondering what the capital improvements at Stuyvesant Square Park are. I don't see any. The others kind of are self-explanatory.
Yes.
Or I already knew the shortcomings, but I don't see what's going on with Stuyvesant Park.
Yes, and we have not received a description yet from the Parks Committee on Stuyvesant Park, which we will have hopefully before our meeting on Wednesday.
Okay.
And
I just wanted to.
Yeah, I know there's a water issue in Stuyvesant Square Park. I am blanking on this. I don't know, Jesus, if you remember the issues for the improvements at Stuyvesant Square Park.
Not off the top of my head, but let me look into my notes and see if I can pull that up. I do remember that the neighbors and stakeholders of Stuyvesant Square Park have been particularly vocal in that their park needs attention. So that may be something for this committee to consider when prioritizing this particular request.
Yes,
there are some flooding issues, I know, so toward the east side of the park. I'm sorry, the west side of the park, farthest west part. But okay.
Yeah, and it had to do with, I remember that the representatives from the Friends of Stuyvesant Square Park had actually come to this park meeting, and I apologize because I actually completely am blanking on what exactly the details are.
I used to be more involved with them than I am now, but
yeah.
So
and we were expecting these descriptions here before our meeting today, but we did not unfortunately get them. So I apologize for that. But we are following up and hopefully we'll have them by tomorrow. And to Jesus's point, and these new items that have been added because members of these groups had come to our meetings, the various committee meetings, whether it be the Friends of Stuyvesant Square Park or people who are very active pickleball players in St. Martin Park, as well as members of the Friends of Dag Hammarskjöld have come. And so to that extent, do we want to, in taking a look at how we prioritize some of these improvements that are required in the parks or any of the other items, how we want to rearrange. My personal opinion, our number one priority here is affordable housing, which is something that is vital in our district as well as around the city. But at the same time, it's going to take a lot for us to get the affordable housing that we need. And should we instead focus on something like capital improvements to Stuyvesant Square Park or an irrigation at Ralph Bunche Park, which would be something that might be easier to fix in a shorter time frame? So that's the question I open up, and Brian has his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, again, as long as something is the top item going to its own agency, then it doesn't matter where it sits relative to other agencies on the list. I think as long as more affordable housing is the top item that would go to HPD or any other relevant agency, then it's fine no matter where it sits on the list. But I don't think in this particular case we're going to get parks to fund anything by putting it number one on this list, because Parks' response on every single major capital thing we've requested is that they don't have the money to do these things. Parks has not been given capital funds to make major investments in parks at any point in the last decade. And most of the parks activity that we've seen in our own district and in districts nearby has been done through the borough president's office and through the council members' discretionary budgets, including the participatory budgeting mechanism. So yeah, I think if we are serious about getting some of these parks funded, we need to advocate for a more substantive change in the way New York City does its budgeting for this stuff, because no matter where we put the park stuff on the list, it's not going to get funded. I hate to be a public pessimist about that kind of thing, but that's been my experience as a member of the committee for the past 8 years. And again, I don't think the ordering on this particular list matters, both in relation to the per agency guideline that we heard from OMB and the fact that the park stuff is continually laid over year to year because of lack of capital funding from the main city budget.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I mean, this year the city did increase the parks budget by 0.5%, which is far below what we had advocated for in our submission last year, which was a 2% of the budget to go to parks. So it's not enough to get the funding we need, but I just wanted to make a note of that before I turn to B, who has her hand up. B, we can't hear you. You're muted.
You have to forgive me. I'm working with one hand. I broke my left hand. So
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I did my trip into Carnegie Hall when it opened, and I really had a great trip. But in any event, I want to follow up what Brian said, because over the years, the parks funding is very significant. And when you have 3 specific items that listed, why should they be competing against each other? Why shouldn't they all be taken as a composite? So maybe one could do more of a composite thing, because otherwise, if you're looking to put numerics, why would we distinguish what's 1, 2, or 3 if each one of those parks needed? And knowing how we haven't gotten funding in the past. So I just raised the fact, can we do one that's a little more inclusive and then include each one and not pick one off the other?
So we can address, I'm going to turn to Jesus, has his hand up to see, let him make his comment.
So just, I did look in my notes regarding specificities on the capital improvements in Stuyvesant Square Park. And it looks like it relates to the east part of the park, the east park. The park house needs a serious renovation beyond what the normal park workers can do. And so that's part of it, and also a restoration of electricity. So that's what the capital improvements that are alluded to are.
Okay, thank you, Jesus. And so to going back to B suggestion that we put the items together rather than have them compete against each other, I think the way we submit it, and usually what we've been told in the past, and I welcome input from anyone who's been on the committee longer, has been that you need to break it down very specifically for each item. Even for Dag Hammarskjöld, where we had multiple items, we were told that no, we should separate those out in the past. Jim has his hand up, so I'll let him comment. You're muted, Jim.
I suggested this, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. In that so many of these capital improvements are location specific as opposed to generally throughout the community district. I had suggested, and I don't think we ever followed it up, having these capital charges or capital requests segregated by the responsible councilmanic district, so that those things that are funded by the community district are, or by the council members specific. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I never cursored over that far. Okay.
Yeah, that's something our office has tried to do specifically for some of these more location specific requests, like replace windows and HVAC.
If that were the case, I would suggest that we rank within those, I guess, the council districts, those things that are coming out of the city budget, and likewise anything that's coming out of the city or the state and the state budget by assembly or senator.
Yeah, and in the past, we have spoken, usually the September meeting, which is our public meeting, we've had, I know that a representative of Keith Power's office is usually able to join. This year, they weren't, but they do check in with us too about funding needs that we are not able to fund otherwise when they do have excess funds available.
I see Jesus's hand is raised.
Jesus.
Hi, I can confirm these requests have to go in an online portal that the Department of City Planning made up. And in the portal, it gets much more granular than all of this than the Airtable does. It asks for specific location, if there is one. That's not to say that it can't be more general or more district-wide, but it does lend itself towards very specific locations, very specific requests. So the guidance we've been getting is that as specific as we can possibly get, the better. That's not to say that if there was just something general that the committee wanted, that the board wanted, that we couldn't put it in there, but it's easier to insert into this. It's easier to put into the portal when it is more specific.
B, do you have any more thoughts on this, or?
No, I'm listening to what we say, and my only concern is, having seen the comments in the past, trying to figure out how you're going to rank these.
Yeah.
It is one competing after another, but if you have to do it even more specific, then you need the item. And I like the idea, and I didn't see it either, that it's by district, so that if the funding is there for the city council person, we might be able to get some help with it. Because otherwise, I don't see the Parks Department funding all those three items.
Yeah, I see, yeah, because like Ralph Bunch would be in Keith's district, but Asher Levy would be in Carlina's.
Right, so
Yeah.
our focus could be with more, we submit it by item, decide which is 1, 2, or 3. And then focus on the city council to see what we can get done.
Thank you for that suggestion. So I mean, if we going back to like Brian's point, like if, for instance, affordable housing is the first item which is going to go to HPD, then it doesn't matter if it's number 1 or not on our list or not. It's just number 1. Similarly, if say Stuyvesant Square Park is number 1 in our list, it's not number 1 on our list, but it's number 1 when it comes to a park request for the city council member, then you would prefer to have it organized in that way.
I will say that is one way we have heard that these requests are treated. One of the things we've started finding out, and especially in talking with district managers who have been around, 2 or 3 times longer than I have, is that there used to be a way that it worked, and now it doesn't necessarily work that way. I think it is perhaps wise not to obsess too much over, is something 6 or is it something 7? Is something 8 or is something 9? Do your best more or less to rank these things. But, and I have, said to board leadership when, for a few years when we started really revamping this process and doing the Airtable, there needs to be a lot more advocacy outside of the normal budget season. Reaching out to the council members to fund some of these things or to push some of these things, that is a great place to start. Because if all we do is sort of work on this now and then don't think about it again until next October, none of this stuff is going to get funded. But if we just pick a few things and really advocate to our electeds, our borough president, everyone, some of these things will start to be noticed, and hopefully we can start ticking them off the list rather. But how the agencies will actually take these and how much value they assign to the rank that each board gives them, because remember, they're getting these sorts of lists from 58 other boards across the city, is anybody's guess, because we have no one can give us a straight answer on that. But I think where we can really make an impact is, let's just get them ranked, but between the budget seasons, the advocacy with our local elected officials, that's where I think we can really find some room for improvement.
Thank you, Jesus. Brian?
I have a point of order. Although this is an interesting topic, the current agenda item that we're discussing is the ordering of this list, and I think we should move on to handling the business and save this for a future agenda item or for old new business.
Was anyone want to second that? I mean, we would have to finish this tonight because we're going to put it in for our resolution for the next Wednesday's full board meeting.
Right, the ordering we have to finish for tonight.
Yes.
So we definitely want to do that. I'm saying we should, as a point of order, we should curtail the discussion on how we submit these to OMB, just because that is the process that the city has said that we have to do this year, and we have a deadline to meet with it, and we can discuss the failings of the process another time.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So we can do that at B?
Yeah, I want to second what Brian says, but I do have one question. Did the committee themselves tell us which of these 3 was had most priority?
No, so we haven't heard from Parks. I've been in touch with Kevin O'Keefe, who's chair of Parks, and he had some other personal things that got in the way of him being able to come back to me on this. So I haven't heard back.
So if we rank it, and at our meeting on Wednesday, the Parks Committee says, no, we wanted A, B, and C, do we have to vote on A, B, and C?
So
Is that,
so I did speak to Kevin. I had just spoke to him because I was expecting this before our meeting, and I spoke to him a little bit earlier today, and he is fine with these items on how we would like to rank them, because he himself thinks similarly that each of these is important. And it's hard to figure out how they themselves, I mean, would want to prioritize them.
thank you.
So we will now just work on the rankings on this. And so, I mean, more of an overall thought process, right? Because in the letter that we submit to OMB, we do write about what are the priorities in our district. And we've always put housing, we've always talked about parks as a priority. And then the last 2 years, we talked about the COVID-19 pandemic and getting vaccination sites and testing in. And, I think in one of the things that we should push for is there are 2 items here, which are for making things ADA compliant. One is where the sidewalks don't have ramps, and I think that's very problematic, and as well as not having ADA compliant subway stations in some parts of the district. And I would like to just get other people's feedback if you think those should be our priorities. And then we go with the numbering based on those priorities. Does anyone object to that? Okay, seeing no objections, we can start with the numbering. So I'm gonna, if you can scroll down, Brendan, because I want to move up the other issue with ADA compliance in the district. The install, remediate drainage curb cuts at intersections. I think that's if you look at the description there. Yes. So this item I would like to move up as a priority and have it in the top 10. If nobody else objects to that.
I second.
Thank you, Jim. You can move out of the description, Brendan. And so if we can move that up into the top 10. And maybe
Where
yeah,
exactly?
Yeah, so if we can put it we put it right above the bus parking.
Okay, so we'll make it number 10.
Yes.
All right, Brendan, I've made that change. If you refresh, it will go live.
And just double checking for the record while things are refreshing, the top priorities are ADA accessibility, parks, and housing affordability, or something else. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that for our records.
Yeah, housing affordability.
Understood.
Okay, and then if we can scroll back to the top, and we just need to figure out how we put in those new items.
Let me also hit refresh again because the curb cuts item was not updated with its appropriate rank.
Okay.
Sometimes it takes a moment. Okay, it's still not showing. Okay.
Brendan, why don't we do this? Why don't I show my screen, and that'll just be easier that way.
Okay.
Please enable me.
Yep. You're good.
All right. Does everyone see the budget requests?
Yes, I see
Yes.
them. And is it large enough for everybody?
I hear silence, so I'll take that as a yes. Does everyone see that there are now 2 number 10s?
Yes.
I figure we'll leave it that way since you guys are probably going to be moving some things around, and then we'll clean it up after you're done with the capital.
Yes. So does everybody agree that these 4 new items, which are all from parks, would we like all of them to be put into the top 10, or would we like them to be separated and put lower? Hannah?
This sort of answers that question, but I am just looking again at the top 10 and the new park in Community District 6. I am wondering if we move that down, given the conversation. I feel like that to me seems like a bigger ask than maybe some of the other ones that we can get, hopefully, the ball rolling on sooner. So I'm wondering if we move that out, and then that frees up some space for either the new ones or whatever else the group thinks is top 10 priority.
Yep, thank you, Hannah.
Yeah.
That's a good suggestion.
We also have 2 housing issues in the top 10, the supportive housing and the affordable housing. I just wonder if we ought to rethink that. Maybe put I think the supportive housing is more important than the affordable housing, given the number of homeless and mentally ill that are in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to let B speak, and then I'm going to open it up to discussion on that point if people want to change that ordering. B?
So I was gonna speak on that point, but let me speak on the parks issue. I think if you're talking about the top 10, I would not have all those parks in the top 10. That's why I was focusing on what the Parks Committee said.
Yes.
I think we focused on 2 of the most significant in the top 10, because that doesn't move everything out of the 10 that we had in order. But I do want to say that supportive housing is extremely important. And we know that affordable housing is a wish, whereas supportive housing can be built in various districts and stuff. And I meant to go to the air table if we were talking about supportive housing for seniors and the disabled, because when you mentioned it, you mentioned just seniors. So I would like to also just check and see if it's for both populations.
Okay, so it's 2 different items. One is more senior housing and one is more supportive housing. I don't think either one of them mentions anybody with disabilities.
We should never distinguish just senior from disabled, because that's pitting 2 populations. They both have a lot of the same requirements.
And there's money in, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah, I mean, these descriptions have come from, so that I'd have to just go back to the committee to confirm if we wanted to change it to be, instead of just provide more housing for seniors, provide more housing for seniors and provide more accessible housing.
But you need accessible housing for seniors and for the disabled.
Yeah.
I don't think we should be trying to distinguish between those populations or competing among. It's just the fact of accessible, and it's almost the same type of housing.
So do you want to make so there's be 2 motions you'd want to make. One is to move supportive housing higher up. And then the second would be to change the item that says provide more housing for seniors to provide more housing for seniors and the disabled.
That
With the
would be
caveat that I
my
will
recommendation.
Yeah,
That's
with
my
the caveat.
recommendation.
Yeah, I would just double check that also with the committee itself for the change in that description. Jim?
I was just about to step away for a minute. I wanted to emphasize or second the suggestion that we put the supportive housing ahead of affordable housing. and that we include with that the senior housing as well as one item.
Okay, so
I
there's
seconding the motion apparent effectively.
so the motion to provide, I'm going to keep them separate because they're separate items here. Provide more supportive housing, to move that higher up in the priority list above more affordable housing. Perhaps maybe we make it one, and move more affordable housing further, because it's a much larger
Ask.
ask. So we take a vote on that, unless, yeah. And Brendan, would you want to just take a hand vote?
Yes. So if you're in favor of the motion, just raise your Zoom hand. Okay. Every committee member was in favor.
Okay, great.
And I can take your Zoom hands down.
Okay, so we will make that number one, and then the more affordable housing can be pushed further below.
To where?
So I will move that below the top 10, because I think if we're going to put these other things in, we're not going to have space for that in the top 10.
Okay, we'll make it 11, I guess, right now. And
Yes. And then if we can change the item 7 where it says provide more housing for seniors, change that to for seniors and the disabled.
all right, number 4, which did read provide more housing for seniors and for seniors, will now read provide more housing for seniors and the disabled.
Okay, thank you. And then the new park and community board in Community District 6, if you can move that below the top 10. Okay, so then in the top 10 now we have 2 spots that have opened up. We don't have a number 3 and we don't have a number 8. And if we can scroll back up to look at the new items, which we need to put in place here. So the installation of the irrigation capability of Ralph Bunch, that's actually been on our list before, or renovations to Ralph Bunch. And there is a problem with the irrigation system there, and that's been the holdup, is my understanding of that. So I would say that we shouldn't put in the top 10. And I will confirm that with the Parks Committee Chair, but that is my understanding. Ooh. The pickleball courts at St. Martin's Park, in the capital improvements at Stive Square Park and Asher Levy. Is anyone have any feelings on which one of those you want to rank higher than others? Each are equally important. I would add that, members of the community had come to speak from Stuyvesant Square Park, as well as some very avid pickleball players have come to multiple meetings of the Parks Committee meeting. Nadeem?
Just for understanding, what are the capital improvements that actually be like? How is it different than what's currently number 9, like the windows and HVAC? Like what is it doing that one isn't supposed to do?
So that, again, we're waiting on the description from Parks, but thank you for pointing that out because I actually missed that. So perhaps we leave that up for now because perhaps that can be combined into that item.
Let me look in my notes. I probably have it in my notes. The committee decided upon recommendation from the Parks Department to split that into 2 separate requests. The HVAC, which apparently has been funded and should move into continued support. What's left is the windows, the locker rooms and dance room at Asser Levy need work done on them.
Okay, thank you, Jesus. Eva?
I just wanted to know, shouldn't we put the item that people in the community, put that one in the top 10? Wouldn't that be Stuyvesant Park over Levy and St. Bartan? Aren't more people affected by the fact that improvements are needed at Stuyvesant more than the other 2?
Yes, and we can prioritize that in the top 10, and perhaps we put that in, we could put that right below construct the continuous esplanade, perhaps.
All right, I'm sorry, repeat that. What goes below construct a continuous esplanade?
The capital improvements in Stuyvesant Square Park.
All right.
Should it really be that low?
If you want to,
Yeah.
people, oh, sorry.
I thought the comment was to make it among the high because of the impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can. So, I
thought-
mean, I would add though, the Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, there has been a lot of community requests for improvements to that too.
Mhm.
That's why I was trying to group them together.
Mhm.
But if people want to move one further up, we can do that. But I see that Brian and Eva both have their hands up. So Brian?
Yeah, I would like to suggest, and we don't have to vote on this, but the remaining 3 parks requests be inserted at any order at around point 22 on the list, below the security cameras at Dag Hammarskjöld and below Bellevue South security cameras. Just to get, I think that they're all equal priority-ish. And at that point in the list, it just seems appropriate relative to everything else and relative to the things we're discussing. So I'm just putting number 22 out there, just as a thing where the walkway counters and the locker room renovations, it's all in the same kind of bucket.
Eva?
My point was, though, that even though they all need improvements and some need major, to me, it should be that the priority is to the total amount of people that are affected by that specific area. And it seems to me, from even a safe point, that more people are affected by Stuyvesant Park than it would be St. Bartan or Asser Levy. So that was my point. The amount of residents or community members, if you want to say, that are affected by what's needed in terms of the repairs, in terms of which population is largest, how these improvements will benefit that.
Thank you for that clarification. And Jim?
Just 2 thoughts. First, I think anything here that's related to public safety, like I think I saw in here some locks and some security cameras. those should be among the highest priorities. And the second thing I think is that we should really do for things like the pickleball court and some other things that are elective. I think that perhaps we should age those based on how long they have been requested and outstanding. I don't remember the pickleball court ever being in any of these budget requests previously. Maybe it was, but I don't remember it. So those are my comments. I would move anything related to public safety up to at least the first five. And everything below public safety issues should go later.
So the pickleball courts is new this year, and we can move it to, I think that Brian's suggestion was to bring it down to item number 22 because other similar items are in there, which I think that was a good suggestion. So perhaps if you can move that there, Jesus.
Yeah, the suggestion was to move all the outstanding parks items that were left after
Yep.
we just discussed the last one down that part in the list. And that's just a suggestion to try to get this, the ball rolling.
Yeah.
We have to get to the expense items after this.
Yeah.
We've only discussed capital in the last two meetings. We haven't discussed expense yet.
And I see item 27 there is like a rear door at the Strauss houses, a couple of other things that would appear to implicate the safety of the tenants or residents. And
I had
just
heard
think
that one of the council members' discretionary funds was going to cover that, so that might move on to continuing service.
Yeah, and it's actually being removed here. If you see the note, it says remove.
Okay.
Otherwise, it was higher before.
Right.
And then the issue.
Anything else that we have that's related to?
I mean, there's the security cameras, which we can move. The issue with the security cameras has been that they need to find who would actually man the security cameras because that is not something that the NYPD would do.
Well, the security cameras aren't live anyway, are they? I mean, the ones they're talking about for the subway are recorded.
Or they recorded, yeah.
Right.
I mean,
would these be live?
Well, the discussions I heard were with Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, the friends of Dag Hammarskjöld had come to speak, and there was some back and forth because I think they actually wanted live cameras. But I'm good with moving that up further up the security cameras if other people are in agreement with that. Does anyone object to it? Seeing no objections, we can take that suggestion to move the security cameras, the request up from the 16 and 17 to the top 10.
So 9 and 10?
Yes, and I think we might have to just do a little bit more number reordering, but I think that's probably.
And everything else was new, right?
Yeah.
The other stuff, and those are down at 22 or
yes, they're down. They're down.
That's fine.
One of them is, I know Brian had mentioned a suggestion to make the others follow suit, but was that a suggestion actually taken?
Yes, 1, 2, and 3, or 1 and 2 that are on this list that don't have an assignment should also be moved.
Yeah.
My suggestion was move them with the pickleball courts and keep them roughly together. They don't need to be adjacent on any list, but this is not that long of a list that it makes a huge difference whether it's
And that should probably, my constituency, as it were, that should probably also apply to Stuyvesant Square Park, unless it's an older request. Do we have an aging on any of these, Jesus?
I'm sorry?
Like what do we have an aging on any of these when they joined the list?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
For some of them that are so old they predate the Airtable.
Yeah.
We do not.
How's the Stuyvesant Square one?
The Stuyvesant Square one is new this year.
Okay. Then I would say it should probably be kicked down to where the other park requests are, unless there's some urgency about it.
Well,
or a public safety implication.
your fellow committee members indicated that stakeholders from that park came to speak, that there's some urgency to this.
What's the urgency?
That,
Any idea?
they desperately need it.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have, with the issue, I guess, with the electricity, in not having electricity in the park.
You mean lights?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's different. That's also a public safety
Yeah.
issue. All right, fine.
All right, so that with moving all those down here, there was a duplicate in 22, which was the incubator space. I moved that down to 25
Yes.
because honestly, this has been here for a very, very long time. And I don't ever recall it ever being discussed in the committees really. So my guess is.
Yeah, and I also reached out to the committee. I reached out to the committee and had a chair and never heard back. And I looked back historically, this has been there before even that Alexandria Center was built.
Isn't this the lab that was built over behind Bellevue?
Yeah, so that's the Alexandria Center. And that's why I was curious about this. Yeah.
I think that's probably been done.
Yeah.
We don't have an aging on it, do we, Jesus?
I can look, let's see.
On the chart? Oh.
That field is hidden because, like I said, any of these requests that predated
The Airtable? Yeah.
the Airtable will not have it.
So it's an old timer, and I think it was
Yeah, this
probably
predated the
related.
Airtable.
Yeah, I think it was probably related to the to that, that field over behind Bellevue.
Yeah, it was, I think what happened, because I actually looked kind of to try to figure out what the history on this was. And it was a request before, then the Alexandria Center was built, and then the request got changed to having more facilities in the district.
I would drop it
Yeah,
completely.
I would just drop it because,
Right.
I do have a comment. If we don't get responses from committee members, Chairman, my comment is it doesn't rise to that much importance. If we don't know what it is, we should not be just debating it. That really is feedback that should come to us. So I'm really concerned about their involvement and in doing the priorities.
Yep, I agree.
I mean, if no one objects, I think that this should be taken out. That was my thought, and it has been for a while, because like I said, it's something that's, I feel like we've had for so long. And the original ask in that, it actually did happen with the Alexandria Center.
All right, so remove this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Ryan?
Do we know which committee requested this?
Yeah, it was Business Affairs, which is the only request that we have from Business Affairs.
All right. I mean, this is a thing that goes with our whatchamacallit plan. I mean, we still want
197
this.
plan.
Yeah, the 197A plan. I mean, one of the reasons why we're still requesting it was because of the Brookdale site redevelopment.
I don't even think Brookdale's going ahead though as originally envisioned. I don't, I'm not privy, but
I mean, we never had a full committee discussion about that as an agenda item, so.
do you see it on the 197A plan now? I mean,
Well, we just had a distributed report from the consultants that talked about the 197A plan and what parts of that were realized, and some of it was realized. And yeah, I mean, I don't think we as a committee, after we bugged all the other committees on the board to submit their budget requests in a timely manner to get them to us, we have not had any agenda where we discussed our own budget requests to give to the budget process. So I think we could have a discussion about this, but because we haven't had that discussion, I think it's an agreeable resolution to just move that to the end, but leave it on the list. I think also, like, How are we in terms of total number of requests right now? We're at 25 if we left that on the list and 24 if we didn't.
If you can scroll at, because there is a.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think expense is starting right under
Yeah.
it.
Yes,
But we have 2 6s. We have a couple of. Okay,
20
so we have some
25.
numbers missing. I think the office will renumber these, but we have
Yeah.
25 without them and 26 with it, and I don't think there's no need whatsoever for us to trim the list at this point. We did have it a capital above 40 at one point, and we did a lot of trimming. So there's no OMB need for us to pull the numbers down. We should include items we think we need. I think on this particular thing, we have not had the debate yet. Now is not the right forum for us to discuss whether that incubator request or that lab space request is still appropriate for the list. I think we should have that discussion. I don't think we should have that discussion now. I think because of that ordering, I think we should leave it on the list and just put it in it last.
so Brian, I just want to backtrack because you had said we as a committee haven't thought about budget requests. So are you saying that this is something that should be under Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee as a request?
Yeah, it sounds like the original request either came from. I mean, maybe it came from the executive committee. We don't have a record of that. I don't think.
This one bounced around a bit. It was at land use, and then it went to business affairs.
Oh, then we definitely can't take it off the list. I mean,
it's kind of bouncing around.
Yeah, because the last place it's been the last 2 years is business affairs.
When was the lab built? Do we know? The lab behind the Bellevue area.
I mean, that's still being developed. It's still being developed.
Right.
They have several lots back there.
Right.
I don't think that's the point. That request is not about the single lot. It's about the district. So if it's originated from another committee, we can't discuss removing it from the list unless.
No, I understand. But my point is, I think that, given when we did the original 197A plan, that this was probably on that built then. I don't remember those labs being there when we were doing the 197A. And I remember in the land use committee, as we were doing the 197A way back when, that this was a priority for us.
Do you feel that the
that's my
197A
recollection.
plan has been met or exceeded in its requests by the Alexandria site?
With respect to this issue, I think it probably was. I mean, I'd have to,
I think that
probably
that's
have to
worth
talk
having
to
a
some.
discussion about.
Yeah, we should
but
have some
at the
old timers
committee-
from land use and talk. Maybe I'm still in touch with some of the old timers, people that were on, Ed Rubin and those guys that were former chairs. So let me check with them. What people that were involved when we actually did the 197A, back in.
Well, I mean, what's
20 years
relevant
ago.
is how the board feels now. We should have a new discussion to update it. It matters who's on the board now, not who was on the board back then.
Right, but they can at least elucidate some background as to what was intended. And as I say, my recollection is that it was a desire for a lab within the hospital district, Bedpan Alley, and that's what this was about. That's my recollection of it.
Me reading all the text, because I wasn't here when that happened, all the text about it says that we see that whole corridor as a district that deserves up development, including potentially available sites which are still being developed and still being renovated.
Right.
And we're looking at we're looking at potentially other sites where there may be new development or city redevelopment or moving of agencies where the priority is for this. So I think our 197A plan still stands. I think whoever has been sponsoring this item should have a new discussion about it. And we should feel free to participate as board members when a recommendation comes to full board. But if this is coming from another committee, we can't take this off the list now.
Well, put it down. I would put it at the bottom, as we said.
Which we have done. It is the last item, and we can take the remove off of that.
Right.
Okay, and then we can move on to expense budget. I know that the numbering's off a little bit because of the way this is updated, but we will fix that later.
Okay, so this is the general order and we can fix the numbers later then, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, it's too big for me to show everything, but I'll scroll slowly and then you guys can have your discussions.
Okay, so I mean, in the expense items, you know, I don't think that there's been any significant changes from what we've had in past years, as these were ongoing expense items. Does anyone have any questions on these? There are certain items, as you can see, have been removed.
Did Parks add the second twice a week composting? They were going to. I remember that was.
It was not.
No, it was not added.
No, they should have.
Yep. Can we put an insert here for that? Because I know that they were going to do that, and as I said, we had a delay in feedback from them, so that's why that is not here.
Mhm.
These are the ones that were discussed at the committee. Is it
The new ones.
I guess I'm sort of unclear, just as Brian mentioned that we can't take off another committee's request. It's probably
Right.
not good practice to do that.
No, it
Be
was
adding them for committees as well.
It was, I mentioned it during full board at some point to the chair of Parks, and this was public. It wasn't like a private conversation. And he said, yes, we will address it. So I guess he probably slipped his mind. So we'll just follow up with him before we finalize, I guess.
Kevin O'Keefe, who's
Kevin,
the chair,
yeah.
actually is listening to the, he's on this call right now, Zoom call, and he says that that is something he was planning on adding in on composting.
Yep. Yeah.
So what is this request again?
Permit twice a week composting within the district. Right now that we only have it once a week. My building, it's on Monday, and things get pretty ripe in the meantime. Does that accord with you, Kevin?
Yeah, he is not a panelist. He can't.
No, I know.
speak,
I
but
know
he-
he's not. I know
Yeah.
he's not. But maybe he can say something in the chat or something.
Yeah.
Ideally, man, what I'd like to see is mandatory composting for buildings over a certain size, public schools, restaurants, delicatessens, et cetera, but that's a whole nother deal. And we're going to charge people $25 because of congestion pricing to travel within Manhattan, supposedly because of their carbon footprint. But at the same time, 15% of, according to the EPA, 15% of all dangerous gases come from food rotting in landfills. So if we're going to do one, we should absolutely do the other. We should also, I thought we're having that as an agenda item this evening, correct? That was on the minutes from last meeting.
Yes, the
Okay.
congestion pricing, and we read it off in the agenda item.
Yep.
Okay, so the composting item has been added in. Any other change? Oh, B. You're muted.
Numbers, okay. And I think, as we said, if these all came from committees, I think our focus should be, where should they be on the list?
Yes.
And my one concern for most of these is we're dealing with issues we've seen before, unfortunately. Increased enforcement funding. The difference here is for HPD as opposed to traffic. We're looking again at comprehensive census of facilities serving the homeless. I thought we do a comprehensive survey. So I would say if we could just concentrate on these additions, and if we've already stated that we won't remove it, I think we just have to figure out where to put them and then move on.
Yes. And that was what we were going to do before we added this one line item. So as you can see, from where it says fund age-in-place support services for seniors to the item on composting, those do not have numbers right now, so we need to prioritize them. And if we're going to follow what we were doing for capital, where the newer item requests are put later, we could move these all at the end of expense, unless there's some item here that people believe requires more priority. Eva.
I just had a question about item 33, new, undertake a study of comprehensive coastal resiliency. Given what's happened in Florida and that Hurricane Ian came up the coast, is that something that should be considered? And then it says next to it that it's 105, I believe, over what's allowed for the description. Is that something that that particular committee has to make more succinct, or we can consider it? And should we consider it based on the fact that we've already had Hurricane Sandy, and as my understanding is, even along the East River, certain things still need to be repaired? Is that something that might be considered to be put on the list for expenses, even though it's new now? First, should it be considered, and does that commit to work on the description more before we can consider it?
So are you saying that the description isn't comprehensive? I guess I wasn't clear on.
Well, it says next to it that it's 105 words or whatever, too long. Does that
I
mean
see the blurb at the bottom? Yeah.
Does that mean that that committee has to make it more concise, and then we consider it based on the fact of climate change definitely affecting us more and more with what happened with Hurricane Ian, and that it did start to come up the East Coast, and we don't appear to have really resolved everything that happened with Hurricane Sandy 10 years ago. So is that something that should be considered and put in as an item in expenses, even though it's now new?
Oh, this, if I can just,
Yeah.
sorry, let me raise my hand. This grew out of the intern who did the study for us of the update of the 197A plan. And this was his suggestion that that we address the vulnerability to flooding of East 25th Street to East 42nd Street. Frankly, I don't know that it's an expense request. It probably ought to be a capital request, because if they're going to do it, then we go into capital costs. It's a soft cost leading to whatever is determined to be necessary, if anything. But that's what this is based on. Apparently, he looked at it, he compared it to the FEMA flood maps, and determined in his own view that we were vulnerable. Now, he's a graduate student and not necessarily somebody that's expert in this area. And the suggestion generally was that, we involve the Army Corps of Engineers and Department of Environmental Conservation, I guess it would be, to do a study. And I don't even know, frankly, that this is a a budget item per se. I think this is probably something that could be resolved by a letter from elected officials, one to the Army Corps of Engineers and the other to the Department of Environmental Conservation.
Okay, so Brian has his hand up, as do Eva and B. So Brian first.
Yeah, I was going to mention that this might be under expense simply because it doesn't qualify as a capital item as per budget cost.
Yeah,
So it might be it might be easily undertaken as an expense program for the agency who might take care of it. A study normally wouldn't be over $35,000 or whatever the rules are for a capital expense versus a expense request.
Eva?
Well, given the fact that it says undertake a study, is it going to be a more comprehensive study? And based on the fact that it wouldn't be over $35,000, so it wouldn't be taking that much out of the budget, should it be reworded? Or is it a more refined study, a more detailed study, and then blurb that the expense will be minimal for something that is still affecting the east side of Manhattan, particularly town? Where would it be placed then?
Yeah, in the priority. And we'll turn it over to B and then we can.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this. I agree with Eva, right? This is really important to do, but I don't know why it didn't come up as a discussion, not as a budget item, but as a discussion presented to the board for a resolution of looking at this whole area since it came out of the interns item. I think there are a lot of facts that could go with this. So I don't even see this right now as a budget item, but I do see it more as a position of the board. And, I don't think we've actually taken the position of the board on this. So I would go a different way on this. And that's my comment because it's not specific enough. And I think we can come up with a lot of other factors and make it a resolution. So if we want to put it on, I would put it on last and bring it back as a resolution.
So I think, Eva was also pointing out that the description needs to be changed. So I'm going to go back to the committee about this item. And there is this other, which was a prior discussion item where there's already a citywide coastal resiliency project. They've been doing, as you know, the work on the East River as well as in Battery Park City. And it's just that they haven't really focused on our area, but there is a larger citywide report on coastal resiliency too. Okay, so if we can go back to the numbering, I think we've discussed this and we'll try to get more input from the committee on this.
I have some documentation on this. I'm just going to take a look.
So just to be clear, this is neither on or off. It's sort of in a holding pattern for now.
Yes, and we'll move it to the bottom for now of the expense list, and then we'll get clarification from the committee. Because there's not enough detail here.
Okay.
And I had suggested that we move the other items also to the end of the list. Does anyone have any other thoughts on that? Seeing no hands, I think you can go ahead and move those.
Here we go. Can I beg the indulgence of the committee for a moment?
If you could just raise your hand, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There was a resolution drafted on this. I drafted it.
Is this the coastal resiliency?
Yep. Manhattan Community Board 6 hereby requests that Mayor Adams, the Borough President, DEC, and Army Corps of Engineers and such other experts as may be necessary convene a planning process to assess the resiliency from flooding for the stretch of Manhattan between 25th Street and 42nd Street and east of First Avenue to ensure this critical area of Manhattan is well protected against floods and storm surges. This was, I don't know, I have to look and see what day I sent this in, but it was sent in some time ago. Stand by. September 3rd, I last modified it. So
Okay.
it went in then to land use probably.
B, did you want to say something?
Yeah.
Or yeah,
Yeah, I wanted to clarify what Jim was saying. So he sent it in the resolution within the committee, but it hasn't gotten out of committee. Is that what you're saying?
Not that I recollect.
Okay.
Land use had to change their schedule because of Yom Kippur.
okay.
I think, right? Am I correct on that, guys?
I mean, I recall the September full board meeting, though, hearing about the report of the intern. I don't remember voting on a resolution, but I could have forgotten, but I definitely remember hearing about this report that the intern had done. And it was really in the context of how well, the intern had done their.
Right. And I forget
So
now.
can we recommend to cut to the chase on this? That you do talk to the committee and change the
Yes.
language?
Yes.
Okay, and we could still put it at the bottom, but I think the resolution, and the land use needs to talk about it. It really should come to the board itself, because I think it's significant.
Yes. And Brendan,
Yes.
do you happen to know if this resolution was brought to the full board for a vote?
Let me double check.
Okay, if you can check while we just go on, it's just to.
And just to clarify, it's specifically a resolution on a coastal resiliency study.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would have been in September board.
Yep.
Actually.
I'm pretty
and
sure the answer is no, but I'm
Hmm.
checking as
Okay.
we're speaking.
I have in the, they may have submitted it as part of the budget request and not used the formal resolution process. But I have here also that the DCP flood hazard mapper shows the study area is or could be vulnerable to flooding to varying degrees, depending on the accuracy of the flood estimates. A comprehensive study of the resiliency and flood risk is necessary to ensure the study can maintain operations during coastal storms. The study is required urgently, so that if flood mitigation measures are required, CB6 residents can suffer loss of waterfront access no longer than 2025, because we've lost so much of it, down near Stuyvesant town and what have you for the last year.
Brendan?
Yes, just to answer your question, Reshma, there wasn't a resolution passed on any sort of study for coastal resiliency in September, which was what I thought, but I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, thank you for confirming, because my recollection from the meeting was just having the discussion about the work that the intern did, but not voting on anything.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, the resolution that passed out of land use was, and through the full board, was a resolution commending our planning fellow on the work that he did.
Yes. Okay, and so then I think we're done with expense, and then it's just continued support. And these are all items that we have gotten confirmation for we're having, either they're being funded or they're in the capital program, but we want to make sure that there's continued support for them. And some of these, as you know, the redesign of Bellevue Park South has already begun. The Murphy Brothers Dog Run is going to be happening, as well as the comfort station. And as well as the security system for PS 116 is in the BOE budget. Does anyone have any comments on this? All right, so seeing no comments, I think we have no further items to discuss, except where we want to just vote to make sure that everyone on the committee is okay with what we've prepared here. And again, we will fill in the blanks. We will order these so that the numbers go in order. I see actually, you as you might, right? There's like 3 11s, 2 12 or 3 12s, but that will all get fixed.
Yeah,
B?
expense is done. I'm working on capital.
Yeah.
Do we
B-
want to caucus before full board?
So B has her hand up.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to call the question on the vote.
Okay, and then just before, to answer your question, Jim, I don't know if we need to caucus or I can just share with everybody when I get the information. And
That's fine.
yeah, because we think that it's going to take that much time. Brian?
I intend to, well, if anybody wanted to second, I maybe shouldn't cut that off, parliamentary, but I was just going to say, we can do a provisional vote with items on the list, and if items have to come off the list in the meantime, then we don't have to revote.
Well, I think if you vote as it is, Brian, you could always come back and have another vote and something gets added.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just that that's logistically now harder than when it was before.
Because we're not meeting in person.
There is a resolution that was used, a resolution language that was used last year. Brendan, why don't you put it up? Maybe that'll help the committee decide.
Yes.
This is the exact copy of just the dates and years have changed of what was used last year as the cover reso for the list.
And Jesus, I think, is particularly highlighting the second resolved clause, which is currently highlighted.
It's a little tricky, but we used that language last year. It should pass the full board this year.
Yeah.
Ideally, there will be minimal changes, and maybe in future years we can sort of do this.
So another thing that can be done is that the list can be amended at the meeting during the vote. Did I get cut off there?
No.
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear
It said my connection was unstable. So
Okay.
yes, when we're doing the vote, when the item comes up, someone can propose to amend the list in a certain way. So if it's a small amendment, it'll likely get approved by the full board as an amendment. So let's just do it. Let's do both.
Okay. So I think, we'll take a vote now, and then you will get, when we have it all updated, you will get that. And then before our meeting or during the meeting, at some point, you can always ask to amend it. And we have the ability to amend even after the meeting on Wednesday.
So I interrupted B's motion, I think. Should we go back to that part where she put the motion
Yes.
forward?
No, I had moved the question.
I'll second it.
All right. We'll take a hand vote. Brendan?
Actually, a roll call vote might be better, just so
Okay.
that it's on the record.
Okay.
So when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. Jim Collins,
In favor.
B. Disman,
In favor.
Dean Kalani,
In favor.
Ava Marie Lassiter,
In favor.
Steve O,
In favor.
Reshma Patel,
In favor.
Hannah Singleman,
In favor.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
In favor.
With 8 in favor, the resolution unanimously passes.
Thank you, Brendan. Okay, so we will have a resolution put together, and it will be shared in the material that you will be getting in preparation for next week's full board meeting. And the next agenda item, as Jim had brought up, is on the issue of congestion pricing. And, this had been discussed. I think it was before I was even on the board when this issue I think it was originally proposed by Mayor Bloomberg and then went into effect much later, but it has been discussed by this board before. But the topic that Jim wanted to bring up for our agenda tonight was how it impacts people living in our district. The cost of items would be higher because, say, trucks coming to deliver would have higher costs, and people who have cars in the district would be penalized. And so, I mean, I can turn it over to you to Jim. I mean, I think I'm the wrong person on this issue because I'm like the person who uses public transit even in LA. So I, don't drive. I don't take even Ubers and taxis.
No. But you buy groceries and
Yeah.
you have furniture delivered and you have any number of things. I believe you live in
Yeah.
the district, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to working here. Yeah, no, this strikes me as I explained briefly earlier. This strikes me as a consumption tax imposed solely on the people in our community district. And unlike, say, somebody that's living in Staten Island, where there's an alternative to it, we have to pay it. The only way to deliver something in our community district is by a truck. So this is going to hurt our small businesses. It will obviously hurt our residents. I mean, that goes without saying. And I would suggest that the committee right to propose exemptions if they're going to impose this. And I think if they impose it as is, I think there's already a prima facie case that it's probably unconstitutional under the federal and New York state constitutions. But I'm a layman, I don't know. But
I did background research on this though. So there are exemptions already, and there are people who are delivery people who can file for exemptions. And they even have a program for taxi drivers who might be impacted by this. And this was
when did that come up? Because I was told repeatedly that there were to be no exemptions for anybody.
No, there are. I can share the article. I will share the articles with you that I had done research on this after you brought this issue up. And I mean, the question in the articles is it fully, because obviously there are going to be people who are going to be negatively impacted, and there are many ways of looking at this. But I just want to bring that up. And I see Brian and B with their hands up, so I'll turn it over to them.
So the first thing I'm going to say is that there will be a traffic mobility review board convened to discuss the tolling program sometime in the future, an issue that the transportation committee will have jurisdiction on and we will look at. There has been some requests from people on the board to look at potential toll rates and exemptions and how they would apply to people, and have an open discussion about that, which I feel is fair. I have simply advised people that the actual program is in law and it will bring benefits to us, and it was ratified by the board already. So I believe the board's current position is that we should have a program just as described. When this was presented to me, this discussion topic, it was given to me first because I'm the transportation chair. And I was told that this would be a discussion over the constitutionality of the congestion pricing law as it is written in the legislature, which I said that is not germane to transportation, but that can go to budget. I think if it's a discussion about the economics and the business impacts of it, the actual right forum for it is the Business Affairs and Licensing Committee and not the Budget and Governance Committee. And I just think that this whole discussion is unnecessary because of the Traffic Mobility Review Board meeting. And I just think, we can discuss that as a board, and additionally, anybody on the board can act as an individual decision to talk about tolling and pricing decisions when that board convenes. I do not think the rest of this is germane to CB6 or is part of our mission. And I think that we should move on from this pretty quickly unless we can find a district angle on this.
B?
So I actually had a discussion with Brian about this whole area because I went back to look at our 2016 resolution supporting congestion pricing. And when the law passed, it passed with a number of things different in our support of the bill. But I do think it's appropriate. There's a number of exceptions being talked about and considered. We don't really have enough information right now. And I do think that as we get the details of it, it's very valid for the board to discuss, but it is a little more specificity as to what the real program will be, as opposed to us making assumptions right now. And I think that's what you see in the media, and that's what you see in a number of things. So I think it is valid for transportation to bring it up once we know what is being considered, and that would be a long discussion. I just don't think the tenor of the discussion for tonight will move us in the direction, because we need to wait to see some more details. And I know Jim did testify himself. I guess you did, Jim? In
Yeah,
front of the
I didn't
yeah.
testify, but I sent in written comments, my wife.
You
and I.
said something. So I
Right.
think it's something that's a major issue ultimately for the board, for our area, but we don't have all the details yet to move on something along this line.
Jim?
Well, as I said, I think this committee was formerly called Budget and Legislative Affairs. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed by our elected representatives, not only in our community district, but throughout Lower Manhattan in the congestion pricing zone below 60th Street. This is going to affect people's pocketbooks. It's not just small businesses. It's basically anybody that has a residence here. I mean, a couple of years ago, we had our kitchen redone in our co-op, and what was supposed to be a project of, what was it, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that, ended up being like 9 months. Now, every time those guys came into town, they would have had to pay the $24 fee or whatever it is. So it's not just delivery people. It's service people, it's doormen, any number of people who have to come into the city. A lot of these guys live out in transit deserts. You have police officers, firemen, what have you, who live way out in Rockland County, Long Island, what have you. You're going to have them pay it. It has to be, my belief is that this board and this committee should write legislation requesting specific exemptions, or that the entire matter be dropped. I believe the entire matter should be dropped. And if anything, if they want to do something, they should just reinstate the old commuter tax that was formerly in the budget prior to, what was it, 2010, when they lost it. That was just local. That was just a fight for who controlled the New York State Senate. They dropped the commuter tax.
Commuter tax went away with Pataki becoming governor, and that was a deal that he made with people in Westchester. And that's a different topic.
Right. No.
Yeah.
But that's my point, is that if you're going to do something like this, if you're going to penalize people, penalize the people who don't live in the city, who come to the city, make their money, and then leave and pay no additional tax. The firefighters don't ask where you live when they come to rescue you. The cops don't ask where you live. So that's my view, and I think we should probably submit something like that as a alternative proposal, rather than penalizing us people who live here and who have had to pay these kind of absurd taxes. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Okay, Brian has his hand up.
I move to table the issue.
The only thing I'll add is I think that B brings up a good point, that this should be ongoing as we get more information. I shared some articles in the chat. There are certain income level, there's discussions on people who can get exemptions. And when this legislation was before the state assembly, I had asked our state assembly person about this and why we just didn't have a commuter tax, because I actually agree on that point, and it is because of that wouldn't pass in our state legislature. Anyway, that's just some additional information. Does anyone want to second Brian?
I will second it.
Okay, do you want to do a roll call vote, Brendan?
Either roll call or a hand vote is fine, whichever you prefer.
For this, okay. We can just do hands then. I think it's easier.
So those who favor the motion to table, raise your Zoom hands. Okay, I see 6 of 8 members' hands are raised, so the motion carries.
All right. I am gonna waive my report. I see Steve O has his hand up though. Steve, was that from the vote or is this something you wanted to say?
That was from the vote, sorry.
Okay. Any old or new business? I mean, I would just add on the new business to B and Jim's point that we should see what more information we get on this congestion pricing and see how that goes and have it as perhaps a discussion item in the future. Any other items anyone wanted to bring up?
I see Brian's hand is raised.
Brian?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, we are